Order in the court. Man, I'm gonna have so much fun with this. What's up, everybody? This is Justice. Welcome back to JD with Justice, where we talk about everything on your journey to getting your JD degree. If you're new here, if you haven't already, go ahead and click that subscribe button for me and we'll get right into the video. So in today's video, I want to share with you guys some tips to stay focused and engaged in your online Zoom classes, which many of us will be taking in this upcoming semester, but these tips can also be applied to if you're actually in physical classes. So the first thing that you need to do to stay focused and engaged in class is to obviously come prepared to class. And a lot of times this will take the form of reading whatever material the professor assigned for that day. I would suggest reading at least a day ahead or the night before. That way the material has enough time to kind of settle in and you can kind of internalize it. Also, I feel like reading under a time crunch is not as effective because you're kind of just browsing through it, especially if you're reading the day of or a couple hours ahead. I just feel like when you do that, you don't really give yourself the time to actually engage with the material while you're reading it, and you're kind of just reading it just to say that you did it, just so that you don't feel completely unprepared for class. So reading at least a day before, I feel like, takes the stress out of being unprepared. So during my first semester of law school, I would read 2 days ahead. So if I had a class on Monday, then I would read for it on Saturday. And then during the second semester, I, for the most part, kind of just did it a day ahead. I feel like both were pretty effective, and I think whichever one you choose kind of just will be based on your own personal style. But for my first semester, I feel like it was important because just in case anything came up, I still had extra time to do my reading the day before class. So in order to stay focused and engaged in class, you're going to want to actually engage with the material as a professor is discussing it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be asking questions every 5 minutes, but you want to make sure that you're actually paying attention to what's going on. And one of the main ways that you can do this is to take really, really good notes. So everyone kind of has their own form of note taking that works for them. But you might find that whatever worked for you in college isn't really working for you in law school. So be open to making that adjustment if you need to. So one note-taking strategy that I would give to you guys is to make adjustments to your case briefs as the professor is going through them. And that's also going to help you stay focused and engaged with the material. So if I have a case brief in front of me and the professor is talking about the case and I realize that maybe the rule that I extracted from the case isn't the one that they want to focus on for what they want us to learn, I'm going to add that in the case brief and in my notes so that anytime I go to study or start making my outlines, I have that information, and that information more than likely is going to be what they test you on. What the professor talks about in class is, for the most part, what they're going to test you on. A case could have several issues and have several rules, but for the most part, your professor only wants you to read it for one or two specific things. So those are the things that you want to focus on. For a Zoom class, you're going to have obviously your professor talking to you on the screen. But if you take notes online, then not being able to, I guess it kind of depends on how you format like the windows for the Zoom and then the window for your writing. You can format it in a way where you can see both at the same time, obviously. And that might work better for you, or you might just be someone who needs to see the whole writing screen when you're taking notes in order to be able to do that effectively, which means that you need to make sure that you're listening as well as possible to your professor as they're going through class. Or you might find it more helpful to take notes by hand while having your computer screen kind of set up and having the professor in front of you like that. So just another tip on note taking, professors will use PowerPoint presentations a lot, especially during a Zoom class. So you want to make sure that you have that information down, but don't let that be the entirety of what your notes are on. You want to add, other things that they might be saying throughout the lecture, any things that you kind of think are important or that you might use to help you understand the material. But I would really say don't rely just on those PowerPoints. So you can also stay engaged with the material in class by answering questions when you weren't the one called on. I don't mean that if a professor calls on someone that you raise your hand like, ooh, me, I can do that. What I mean is that if a professor cold calls on someone and they're about to answer the question, you also want to be thinking about what the answer to that question is and kind of formulate and formulate an answer as if you were the one that's called on. If the professor calls on a student, don't raise your hand. Like, no one, most people don't really like that, even if that student is struggling, unless the professor asks, if other students want to help him out, or her, whoever it is. Don't try to take that away, even if you really know what the answer is. Professors cold call on people as part of their teaching strategy, and part of what students should be able to learn in school is to be able to answer questions on a whim, because that's what you're going to be doing in court. So you don't want to take away that opportunity from someone else. So basically, you just want to kind of pretend as if you're answering the question kind of in your head. And sometimes you might not know it. Sometimes you might be thankful that the professor didn't call on you for that question, but that's okay. Making sure that you're even thinking about it is going to keep you engaged with the material and engaged with the professor. So you should also be asking questions if you need to in order to stay engaged with the material in class. Hand raising can be a little tricky on Zoom calls. Some professors have a particular way they want to do it, whether they want you to use the hand raising button, or if they just want you to take yourself off mute, depending on what size the class is. You have a question, just to kind of do your best to get it answered. And a lot of professors will take time in the class, whether that's in a Zoom class or in an actual physical class, just to kind of see if anyone, to kind of open the board and see if anyone has questions. So if you do, definitely take advantage of that, and then that will help you. Because if you have a question about the material that you were just talking about and the professor makes a transition, a lot of times what was already talked about connects to what they're about to talk about. So if you don't understand that, then you're going to have trouble understanding what the next topic is. So you want to make sure that you don't have any lingering thoughts or concerns or questions, so that you can understand the next topic that the professor is going to talk about. Okay, so in order to stay focused and engaged, you're also going to want to limit other activity that's going on your laptop. I know that can be kind of hard, because your laptop and the internet in general is a huge temptation. In a Zoom class, you don't really have the opportunity or the choice to not have a laptop in front of you. You need that, obviously, to go to class. So it's going to kind of provide a temptation. But if you're doing the things that you should be doing and to engage with the professor, engage with the material, you shouldn't have a whole lot of time to be doing a whole lot of other stuff on your laptop, whether that's, online shopping, Amazon, texting your friends, anything like that. And if that is something that you struggle with, I would suggest you can put your computer on do not, well, if it's a MacBook, I don't know about other computers, but even if you can't put it on do not disturb, you can ask your friends or your family not to contact you during this time because you're in class. But the best way to kind of not be tempted by those other distractions is really just to focus on class, and try to, even if that means you have to take super copious notes just so you won't get distracted. I would say it would be better to do that than to just kind of go off on a tangent and start doing other stuff. You want to avoid that as much as possible. Okay, so the last tip that I would suggest to you guys to stay focused and engaged in class is something that I don't think really ever did in my educational career until I got to law school, and that is to review your notes before class. My first semester of law school, I would come to class about 15 minutes early with my coffee, and then I would open up my case briefs, my notes if I had any, and then also my book to whatever pages that we were going to be discussing for that day. So basically how I would review is just to go over my case briefs, especially during my first semester, my first year, because at that time I was reading 2 days ahead. So by the time I got to class, I needed to kind of take some time just to refamiliarize myself with what the issue was and what the facts were and what the holding, all those types of things. I still had to do it during my second semester because, so much can happen between reading a case brief and then when you start class. So it's always best, I feel just to kind of eat, because your case brief probably shouldn't be super long. So it shouldn't take too much time, just to kind of go over it really quick so that you can kind of have it fresh in your mind when it comes up for discussion in class. Okay guys, so those were kind of just my tips and tricks to stay focused and engaged in class. I know this whole situation is very much less than ideal, and that a lot of people will probably prefer to be in actual physical classes, especially since that's the best way that a lot of people learn. But that doesn't mean that you all can't be, or that we all can't be successful in law school still. So I hope you guys found this information helpful and that you'll be able to implement some of these tips in your Zoom classes or in your physical classes. Make sure to leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Court adjourned.